I have to tell you something that, for many authors, maybe not for others, but for authors like me, we plan the book launch before we even plan the book. So the fact that we're having this in the Opera House, and so far it's COVID, and I really hope this is not a super spreader event, so I hope you've all got your masks on. So it's a dream to be here, to have you with us. I really want to thank you with so many other commitments that you have, and every other place that you could be, that you are here with us today. I can't actually see you very well, but I'm going to ask you to start with a quiz. Those who were there at my previous book launches know that I like to start with a quiz. I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions, and all you need to do is raise your hand. Okay, so first question is, do you know anyone in your immediate circle who was diagnosed with cancer and was open about it? Could you just raise your hand if there was someone in your immediate circle? And really, the spotlight's on me, but I think I see a lot of hands. So the second question, okay, now yes. Can you just do that again so I can see it? Yes, so it's pretty much everyone in the auditorium. And I would now like to ask you, do you know anyone with a mental health condition in your immediate circle who was open about it? And there are far fewer. Now, cancer, unfortunately, is really tragic. It has claimed my own uncle in our family. But the fact is, the chances of actually developing a mental health condition in our country is higher than the chance of getting cancer. And so that's, a fact that we just don't know much about. And the issue is that mental health is a bit like vitamin D, right? So we all started taking these vitamin D tests a few years ago, and we found out that we were deficient, and we all needed more sunlight, and so we started treating it. But that sunlight is what mental health needs. And that is why we're here today. And this is part of the sunlight. And it might seem like this huge vanity project, right? To write a book about your life and to have all this media and to be in the Royal Opera House. But really, I want to just share one message that I got from somebody who I was just exchanging emails with for work, but I've never even met this person. And he said, at 5:45 in the morning, he messaged me. And he said that I've read your book. I couldn't stop reading it. I'm going to give it to somebody who wrote a book on depression. I'm going to give it to a friend who's going through a personal trauma beyond explanation. I'm going to give it to somebody who lost her mother and who's going through anxiety. I'm going to say sorry to my wife who had postpartum depression, and I couldn't understand what she was going through. And you know what? I'm going to give you a playlist because you said you like music, and so I hope you start your day with a playlist, which was really nice of him. But that's the reason why I'm doing this, because I think those stories are few. It's not that memoirs have not been written in India. Actually, even in bipolar, there's some beautiful memoirs that have been written, but I think we don't have so many solutions, and this is what I've tried to provide. So this book really is for everyone. Like Radhika was saying, that only 1% of people have bipolar. So you might be thinking, why should I read a book on bipolar? And one of my own family members who's close to me said, I'm so proud of you. You've written this book on bipolar and on mental health, and you're going to help lots of people. And I said, you know what? It's going to help you. And she looked at the cover and she said, me? I don't have a mental health problem. And I said, no, actually it's about mental wellness. It's for, only 1% might have bipolar, but 100% of people need mental wellness. So this is all about hacking your mental health and wellness. And I have to tell you that even though it's not a prescription, I did have this book vetted by top psychiatrists in India, in the UK, and in the US. So the advice that you're getting is definitely sound from that perspective. And more than really a book or a handbook, it's really an invitation for you to think about what could work well for you and for you to have that conversation with somebody who is close to you. So let me tell you a little bit about my journey. So a few months ago, I had dinner with a school friend whose teenage son is on the autism spectrum. And she told me that, my son sees movies in his head. And honestly, my face just lit up, and I said, finally, someone like me. I mean, autism and bipolar are different, but there's some similarities over there. And so I said, okay, he sees movies in his head. What kind of movies? So she said, well, there are lots of animals in them, and then they usually die in the end. And I said, well, this is not dissimilar. There's, in my movies, there's drama, there's action, there's comedy, but there's a lot of sexual violence also, there's trauma, and it can be really difficult. And the challenge with these movies in your head is that you are totally disconnected from the outside world when all of this is going on. And these movies are so engrossing, just like she said about her son, that you can't pay attention. And just imagine being in a dark cinema okay, and you're watching this, and whether it's entertaining, whether it's scary, whether it's traumatic, you're fascinated by it, and there's imagery, there's soundtracks going on, and somebody knocks on there and says, have you taken your meds? When did you last sleep? How many hours have you slept? And they're saying it out of concern, but honestly what you're thinking is, I am going to throw something at you because there is so much going on inside my head that I can't actually concentrate on a thing that you've said. And my favorite bipolar joke, if you get it, is that the trouble with being bipolar is that you can't really take your mind off the problem. You just sort of have to figure it out. So bipolar is serious. I mean, I make jokes, but it is in the same realm of something like schizophrenia, right? And I have the more severe version of it. It's in the form of the mania that Radhika described, and also some of the depression. And there is something very, very raw and intense and very passionate and very energetic inside me. It is that tigress who I know that's there in me. There is that sea monster which is there in me. It's a different form of energy, and actually I'm only coming to terms now with what that expression of that energy is. But it is very raw, and to be honest, I'm surprised that there are parts of this book that my family even let me publish. You can have a look at it. So anyway, then my friend asked me, what shall I tell my son about the movies and how to deal with them? So I said, look, I can only give you my advice, which is you ask him who has got the remote control for that movie. Is that remote control in his hand, or is that remote control in somebody else's hand? And that is exactly what my mentor, Koza Merchant, asked me once. And he said, he sat me down when I had given him 50 pages of writing in 5 days and so many voice notes. And he said, are you going to live in your head, or are you going to live in the real world? And after you get manic, you get so dejected and disappointed because all these grand schemes that you've had, none of that has happened, and you're just so down. And I didn't even know what he meant by that, but I was listening to him. So I'm going to just show you some pictures of my journey because I think that will help to understand. Could we have the first picture, please? This is actually a picture of me when I was manic. Last time I was manic, which was 4 years ago. And I've been stable since then. And if you can see and you look closely, you can see that I haven't slept, there's a strain on my face. And people say mania is about a high, but this is not a picture of somebody who is happy. You can also see how much an ally Radhika is, and this was actually taken, I think, by Nandini, my cousin, who's also been a big ally. So then I want to show you another picture. This is me when I was depressed back in 2013. And, really many of us, especially women and particularly Indian women, we do not have the luxury of sitting in our pajamas and being depressed. We have children to look after, we have responsibilities, and I would always urge the media when they are trying to portray pictures of what a manic person looks like and what a depressed person looks like, to look at the subtleties of it and not to have the typical pictures that you see, because this is a picture of somebody who is very quiet and very withdrawn and just trying to figure out, do they want to live life at all? And the next one, please. And this is my normal personality, right? This is what I'm trying to say, that personality and illness are two different things. This is a picture that was taken before my, manic episodes began, back when I was a student. And I think this is what my personality is, a little vibrant, a little bit hatke, wearing these yellow sunglasses. And the next one is, this is me now. Just a few months ago, I'm posing with my bookcase at home. I'm kind of always hoping that somebody from Vogue is going to come by and do an interview with me. So this is me, right? Now, so how did this transition happen, right? So this, the next one, please. And the transition really is what I call the 7 therapies in the book, and I'll talk about them. So these 7 therapies is something that I've evolved and written about. And I said that the first therapy really is the medical therapy, okay, which is the drug therapy and the psychotherapy, and it is essential. You just cannot survive without it. Radhika talked about it and how difficult it was for us to get onto it, but it really is essential. Love therapy, which is the role of the caregivers in the family, and I think I don't can add anything more than what Radhika has said, but particularly Amit, Radhika, and Mom have just been my primary caregivers, but we've had so much extended family over the years who've played a role. And then I would say lifestyle therapy, and by lifestyle therapy, I mean sleep, nutrition, exercise, and also play, right? To have a little bit of joy in my life. I mean, I just love playing with my children, playing table tennis or playing other games with them, or just being involved in their Lego and other things. But without these three, the medical, the love, and the lifestyle, you just cannot get a handle on your condition. And unfortunately, in our country, people are struggling with just these three. The maximum messages I get from people are just to say, oh, can you just, I'm only taking the meds and nothing's happening. But just taking the meds is not enough, it's essential, but you have to have this troika, as I call it, right? And I'll just give you an example of how these three go hand in hand. So just this week, right, just now as in real time, I knew this week was going to be a very emotionally charged week for me. I may lose sleep, I'll probably get anxious. So I decided that I'm going to work out every single day, which I had been slipping on my workout. So I said, I'm going to make workout the priority and I'm going to fit work around it. I'm going to have an extra session of therapy with my therapist. And, I was emotional in that session and I was a bit tearful because it's been such a long journey. But that's also what allows me to be kind of happy and pretty chilled about the whole thing today, right? And that is what therapy does. It makes you feel so much better. And then I spent a lot of time relaxing with Mom and Radhika and, of course, most importantly, Apollo, the dog. And then I think I did the best thing possible, which is I avoided IPL as much as possible because I think that's the best thing for my mental health, to avoid that. And then I took a pill to help me sleep, right, which is prescribed by my doctor, and it's safe, and it's completely going to give me that peace of mind. So this is these three therapies that are just helping one cope, right? But as I said, most families and individuals struggle with just these three. But while they are the necessary and they are that protective scaffolding that is required, they are not sufficient to thrive. If you want to go from surviving to thriving, then you need to have more therapies, okay, which is what I have experienced, and I've been fortunate enough to experience that. So the first of these four is the role of allies. Okay, these are people who are a little bit distant from the family and who can be there also as a form of empathy. So I spoke about mentors, I have networks like my book club or my writers club, and very importantly, I have my daily download friends. I mean, these are people whom I download my whole day with every day. And I think, in today's day and age, we have friends that we can call at 2 in the morning in an emergency, but do we really have friends that we can download on a daily basis? And it's not like we're sharing like deep and meaningful conversations. We're just literally saying, what's happened in the day, and we're in touch with each other. So I think they really keep me peaceful and joyful. And related to that, I think that we live in a country which I call the chatterbox nation. Do we really need to be the chatbot nation? I have never used apps for mental health. I know there are lots out there, and there are a lot of people in this industry, and there are a lot of money going into this industry, but really we are the chatterbox nation, and can we not use mental health and technology to build communities that can support each other? So that was one of my thinking in the role of the allies. The second big game changer for me in terms of being able to thrive was being able to share my situation at work. And I shared it with Sukumar, my editor at the Mint, with Seema Chaudhary, who was my boss at the Mint, and also with Pramad Sinha at Anant. And they were so open about it, and there was no choice. I had to share it because I was slipping up at work. So I had to tell them that this is part of who I am, this is part of the package. And because they accepted it and they accommodated me in roles which would work for my condition, I've been at the Mint for 14 years now. I've been teaching at Anant for now about 4 years. And this is actually one area which I think India can do a lot on is workplace mental health. I totally intend to be an advocate for that, and if you would like to engage with me, I would love to hear from you. So allies and workplace, and then the very important part is the inner work, the conversation that you have with yourself, right? Why are the movies coming into my head in the first place? What are the triggers? As Radhika said, is it stress? What is it? And here I've had literally, I started maintaining a journal 10 years ago. I've had a 10-year conversation with myself to understand what is success for me? What is happiness? What is my identity? Whose validation am I seeking? What is the narrative of my life that is going to make me feel fulfilled? And these are the questions that were really triggering a lot of my episodes, and I think to some extent I have resolved them, and I'm in a much, much better place. My scorecard is a lot more internal than it used to be versus being really external. And the last one is spiritual therapy, okay, which is one of the ways of saying it is the means by which I had the conversation with yourself. Like, not many people would want to open up a journal and write. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can always read any text any spiritual text, religious text that you find really, that speaks to you, okay? There was actually one shlok from the Bhagavad Gita that changed my life. You know, I'm a part-time professor, right? So I'll give you homework and I'll tell you, you can look up the book and find out which shlok it was and whether it resonates with you. But because I'm a nice professor, I'll say it's in chapter 8, so it'll make it easier for you and you can look it up and see if that's good for you. But yeah, I think that, you know, this was a really important part of my journey. Now, it might sound like a lot, right? 7 therapies, I'm struggling with 1 or 2, how do I do that? And the other point, you might think that, you know, it's very easy for all of us sitting in the opera house to say, okay, we come from a place of privilege, we have the resources, it's easy enough for Aparna to write this book, she had the time to do it. But I'll say one thing, these therapies apply to everyone. The context may change. Okay, if there is a woman who's suffering from depression in rural Rajasthan, her context is entirely different from mine. I completely acknowledge that. But the role of the family, the role of community, the need for medication, the need to have lifestyle, the role that spirituality can play and religion and faith can play in her life are pretty much the same as it would be for my life. You know, so I think what I'm really asking you to do is to examine your own context and see how this could work for you. And also the other thing is the book has a lot of references to people at the bottom of the pyramid or doing, you know, work for people in the bottom of the pyramid who can also access mental health. So I think we have a long way to go as a country. I'm not denying that at all. But I think it's really important to recognize that some aspects of the way to look at these conditions are universal. And what we obviously need to do is to look at how to deliver access to people in a more scalable and sustainable way. So a couple of just last things, you know, I would say on happiness. People say that happiness is a choice and a decision. And I think for everyone in this room, it is clearly a choice and a decision. But it is also it is a daily practice. It's like a yoga practice. It's something you need to practice to be good at. I firmly believe that. It's a state of mind when you're living with hope. And some say, you know, some people have told me that Chemical Khichdi is an act of courage. But more than an act of courage, I look at it as an act of vulnerability and of resilience. Like I said, you know, I didn't want to be just waiting around and, you know, sitting around for the kids to come home and just moping in bed. That's not the life I wanted for myself. And I was very clear that I wanted to live the life that I wanted to lead. So I really think that just because you have a vulnerability, it doesn't mean that you have to be a victim of that vulnerability, whatever that vulnerability is. And somewhere perhaps down the line, you even have to, if not surrender to that vulnerability, but, you know, maybe even learn to make peace with it or even learn to love it. So please read this book to have a conversation with yourself, with the people you love. If you want to chat with me, I'm always around. You know, I'm talking to strangers every night at 9 in the night, so I can definitely have a conversation with you. It's not a problem. And I would like to ask you, if mental health is a team sport, whose team are you on? Whose daily download friend are you? Whose ally are you? Whose colleague are you? Whose caregiver are you? Because even today, I'm a primary caregiver of the people in my family. I may have a mental health condition, but that doesn't exclude me from that role. And I think we all play those multiple roles. So on a lighter note, you know, my publicist, my amazing publicist, Pratik at Penguin, has given me lots of targets to achieve. So I'll leave you with a joke. And it says, "Jahan na paunche bail gaadi, udhar hi paunche marwadi." Okay? So I'll add to that and I'll say, "Jahan na paunche marwadi, udhar hi paunche Chemical Khichdi." Okay? It is my dream to have this book translated into Indian languages. For that, it has to resonate in English. I know many of you have been waiting for your copies on Amazon. We've had like a litany of problems in getting them. But please go out and get another one and give it to someone who you think would benefit. Thank you so much for being here. It's really been a privilege.